All right, so we'll just get started in around 5 minutes. And yeah, so for the four of you, welcome to the lecture. Okay, so this may take a few more minutes. I'm having a little technical glitch here, but we should get started soon enough. Sorry for the inconvenience. All right, this is RN50. Welcome back to everyone. Hope you had a good week, and today we're gonna get back to React Native. So just a quick summary. In the past few weeks, we started out talking about JavaScript, moving more into the paradigms. Then we went into React, ultimately culminating into React Native. And then we looked at user input. Um, and lastly, we basically looked at TCP/IP and the web world. Would someone like to tell me what TCP/IP stands for? Anyone at all? So So transfer communication protocol, internet protocol, right? So we talked about how they link with the envelopes and basically how the data is sent. We also then talked about HTML. Would someone like to tell me what HTML stands for?
Hypertext Markup Language.
Good job, Ashley. Would you like to kind of define HTML in some ways? What exactly is its core function?
HTML is mainly used to present the content on a web page, such as elements like headings, links, buttons, form field controls, and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's used to just, stylize or not exactly stylize. It basically defines what appears on the web page, right? Or as we call it, user interface. So in terms of just raw HTML, you'll have headings, links, buttons, tables, forms, things like that. In terms of React, they're components, right? So components is the same thing as HTML tags, right? So today we're going to talk about style, and again, I increasingly moved away from slides because one, slides just take a lot of time, especially when you're blind to make. It's really, really hard, and but more importantly, that because we're going to be writing a lot of code and looking at some pseudocode, my slides will just be very, very bland. So, yeah. So today we're going to look at stylizing. So, would someone like to tell me how do we style things in web? What do we use?
Also, we'll use CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, to
Yeah,
uh, give your page some color or the user interface a better look and feel.
yeah. So we use cascading style sheets, right? So they're essentially either inline with the tag, or sometimes they're put into the head as like a style. So basically, there's a style tag in HTML that defines this whole thing. Or more importantly, would someone like to tell me what's the most convenient and easiest way to just link CSS to an HTML page? How would you do it? Would anyone like to tell me?
I think it's something in the lines of less than link rel equals
Yeah,
style
so that's
dot
the tag,
css.
but basically, what's the underlying concept? What do you exactly do?
Okay,
So,
you write the CSS in a file and you
right,
link that same file into your HTML document,
right. So
which
you can
then
just,
styles
link
each
files like
heading or
that.
paragraph accordingly.
Yeah, and you can even use, and that'll allow you to even use things called CDNs, which are basically content delivery networks, which basically store these kind of data in the cloud. Okay. So, would anyone like to guess now? How would we style things in React Native? How do we do it on a mobile device?
Probably with the view tag.
Okay. How would we do it with the view tag? You're on the right track. How would we do it?
I guess it has like a style property.
Good job. So it has a style prop, right? So if I were to share my screen and let's open up the application that we made. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to open like that. I'm going to, oh, it's stored there. Okay, it's not stored here. Sorry for the, oh, there we go. So we have this alphabet application, right? And basically we have a style prop. Now I'll ask you one more question, okay? I promise this is the last one for the next 5 minutes, but what does a style prop take as an argument?
Probably font size and color.
All right, so it basically takes some style elements. How does it take this? Can you guess like how will it, which data structure will it use to take, these kind of things?
Probably. Sorry, what did you say? Oh,
Which,
parameters maybe.
okay, so you're very much correct. It's just that, in React Native, we
Strings.
actually use, yeah, in a way, but we actually use something called JavaScript object, okay, for styling.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull up a uh, documentation here. So let's just see what that has to say because that'll define it better. So say I were to search for, so basically, if we were to look here, React Native provides a very, very good style documentation. And you basically use objects, as I said, for styling. And what do you think would that give you as a benefit? Would you,
Sorry, could you please repeat?
yeah. So my question is, what would using a JavaScript object be, how would it be advantageous while making,
I'd say due to the fact that almost each and every mobile device has a JavaScript engine, so it
sorry?
doesn't have to look everywhere.
Yeah, right?
I
That's
don't
one
know.
thing. That's one thing. And it actually even gives you one more benefit. It gives you kind of dynamic styling, okay? For your different components. So let's see this in action. Let's open up app.js. Oh, I'm going to open it up. And this is the code that we had written for the application. If you all remember, the alphabets application that basically, gave you the position of um, well, it gave you the position of an alphabet, right? So, so we say import style sheet, which we'll come to in a second, but basically we can, for example, go into this alphabets class, right? So we say view styles equals style.container. Now in this text that says alpha position finder, right? Let's give this a style. So style equals, we open up two curly braces. Would someone like to tell me why we open up two curly braces and why not just one? Because we're using one for an object. So I'll give you a hint. One is for the object, the inner one's for the object. What will the outer curly brace be for?
Your styling parameters would maybe be in there.
Yeah, so basically we said that, all JavaScript code, pure JavaScript code, while, writing certain tags has to be, enclosed in braces. For example, your on-click property will be enclosed in braces, right? Because that's some JavaScript code. So let's just say for a style, um, let's give this a font weight of bold and a justify content of 10, right? Look, and there we go. So we have that saved. All right, let's see how this looks. Let's we'll cd into this directory. Um, RN50 slash SRC3 slash, there we go. So You all know this, Expo start. This will start the server. And while we're waiting for the server, you can just notice, if you look at the code again, you can see that it's basically just some JavaScript parameters, right? We say font weight, colon, bold in quotes. So one more distinction between CSS and using JavaScript objects for styling is that when you use JavaScript objects, you don't write font dash weight, which you would do in CSS. You don't separate words with a dash. You actually write it in camel case. Someone like to tell me what camel case is? Camel case is?
When the first letter is lowercase and the second after a full stop or an underscore is uppercase, or
Yeah, so it's something like that. It's something basically the first word first. So if you have like multiple words in the same, like if you want to write a variable name and you have multiple words, you would write the first letter of the first word is small, and then subsequently each letter of like each starting letter of word would be capitalized. So font weight over there, F would be small and W would be capitalized. Okay. So just waiting for start. Meanwhile, does anyone have any questions on previous lectures based on any of the topics while we're waiting for this to start up? All right, so we're just gonna, I think, nope. Oh, it is doing something. So it's taking a lot of time to, for some reason. Okay, so then let's leave this text as default. So there we go. So now it's attempting to open it in a web browser. Now I would mirror my screen of my phone, but for some reason I'm not able to do that because I just installed Android 11 and that's just blocking the mirroring. So hopefully I'll get that fixed soon enough. Uh, if not, then, well, that's bad. I, what? Okay, so this is still opening up in a web browser. Till then, let's, write some more styles, shall we? Right, so we have another text that says this tool, if given an alphabet, will find its position in the English alphabet. Would someone like to tell me what style can we apply to this? So open a style. What would you like to see in this? Any kind of style, or is it okay if we can leave this unstyled? So we made the first text bold and we aligned it to send, we justified the
I'd say
content to
we
be center.
can leave it the way it is.
All right, so let's leave it as it is. Okay, so we have a text input, which we really cannot style, unfortunately. We have a button, which we can style. Anyone want to tell me what we can style this as? And we also have a clear input button. So would someone want to tell me how we can style these buttons? Anything that you would like to see, or are those also okay? Now these are certain visual elements, so the people without sight, that's okay. But basically, again, you don't need to memorize these properties. You can always Google them. They're the same as HTML properties, but it's just said differently. Also, we use what's called flexbox in React Native, and flexbox basically defines how much of the space should your component fill on the screen, and also how much, well, it basically defines the layout. So in web, it's row, so everything's next to each other, whereas in React Native, in mobile world, it's column. All right, this is not opening in a web browser, which is annoying me. So till then, let's play around with Flexbox, shall we? So if I were to set, now I'm quickly going to go down to my style component and just change some things here. Flex direction. I'm going to set it to row, the flex direction. Basically, the buttons will be next to each other. That'll slightly be better. Uh, Background color is pound FFF for this is for our view. Okay, so everything that is in the view. Align items, we've set center. Also set justify content to be center. So didn't really need to do that. Oh, there we go. So I think it is. Yep, it is opening in a web browser. And there we go. So there we go. I think I'm just gonna check. And there we go. So if you can see, the first one is actually bold and it's clearly visible, right? So any questions about how we styled that prop? Any questions about styling, things like that? All right. So most phones have a nav bar or a status bar at the top, right? How would we? So basically, we want the people to be able to see the status bar, and for the people to be able to, see our content. So our content shouldn't hide the status bar. So how would we do that? How would we go about styling our text that we have or our view to basically, well, for people to be able to see the status bar as well? Anyone have any ideas? How would we do that? How would you do it in web? How would you know, move the content down a little in the web world? So you'd apply some padding, right? So you would apply, some padding at the top, and that would just move the content down, right? So let's just go to our text. And let's just say padding top, and let's give it an arbitrary value of 50. Now, in web, would anyone like to tell me the unit of what you say? Like, for example, if you'd say padding top, what unit would you give it in, like pixels, or what unit would you give your values in?
Probably in millimeters,
Okay, that's sometimes used
inches.
in, okay. So it's actually pixels in the web, because recall that everything on the screen is just a pixel, right? However, in a
Okay.
mobile device, we actually don't have units. So we use unitless numbers for everything. Would anyone like to tell me why we use unitless numbers? Anyone have any ideas on why we use unitless numbers in the mobile world? So there are so many mobile devices with different screens which have different pixel densities, and basically they have different sizes and things like that. So it's just easier to kind of abstract that information out. So when you're making an application, because there are thousands or tens of thousands of mobile devices. I think Android releases like at least 1,000 Android devices are released every year. So there are, well, way more than 1 million actually devices out there. So you really cannot just um, you cannot write because these devices all have different pixel densities, so you really cannot write it in pixels. And so it just has like a one value fits for everyone, so it's like an abstract value. And you know what the smart thing about using unitless numbers is the fact that when you use unitless numbers, React Native or the JavaScript library is actually smart enough to kind of just adapt. So say I'm using I have a OnePlus 5, so it would adapt because my phone doesn't have such a big screen, but it has a high pixel density. So it has a 5.5-inch screen, so it would adapt to that. Say someone has like one of my family members have an iPhone, which is slightly bigger, and so that has a lower pixel density though, and so it'll adapt. So basically, just the JavaScript library adapts the content and the aspect ratio based on the pixel density. Right? Questions about unitless numbers, pixel densities, and how React Native manages those? Anyone? And also about padding and how we manage that. All right, so there's actually this thing called style sheet, okay? So if you look at the bottom of my code, there is this line, const styles equals style sheet dot create, and it's taking this curly brace opening. So it's an open parenthesis and an open curly brace. What does an open curly brace signify? Anyone here? In JavaScript, not in JSX or the way React Native manages elements. In pure JavaScript, what does an open brace signify?
An opening code block.
Okay, that's one thing. Any other ideas? It's a data type. I'm going to give you that hint.
Object.
Good job. So the style sheet thing. So if you look at the second line, actually third line of my code, we say import style sheet is one of the things. And style sheet is basically this component that React Native offers to us, or it's actually like an object, a class, sorry, my bad. And basically it has one method, okay, or function that lives inside of it called create. And basically what this does is, basically it's the same thing as what we do. So if you notice, if you look at my text attribute, we will say, 1 second. So we're basically passing in an object to the style attribute, right? What style sheet does is it makes these objects for us, right? So we can just use, basically it's like a container for all of our style objects, okay? And we can just, pass those objects around to different components. So say I want this, say I have this text thing, and I'm going to copy this object here. I'm going to actually cut it, but so I'm just going to cut that and say we go and over here we create another object that says well, let's just call this text style. And basically what we're doing here is we're kind of nesting objects. So text style is our key, and the value of text style is this style object. Okay. So paste that up. Share. And I'm gonna add a trailing comma here just in case. And now if we go back, now would someone like to tell me, how do I reference that style we just mentioned that we call text style? How do I reference that here in the style property? How would I reference it? It's an object, okay? It's an object that lives inside an object. So I can just say styles dot text, okay? If I save this, and it's the same thing, right? It's if I just reload that, there we go. See, it's the same. It's basically the same style, but we've just abstracted it. Now, I've already mentioned this, but what is the advantage of using style sheet as opposed to, writing pure JavaScript objects in each property? Even if you've never programmed before, what just seems better about this code now? What just looks better about this code?
It's more dynamic,
Okay, it's more dynamic. That's one thing
better,
that's correct. One more.
better organized.
Yeah, better organized. So everything's modular, right? And what's the advantage of doing this? How would this help us? Okay, so say I want to reference that in the second text that explains everything. I could just say style equals style start next style, right? And if I save that, and if you see, you can see both of those texts are now bold, okay? All right, so questions about style sheet and how style sheet is managing our styles. Anyone have any questions about that? All right, so the last thing that we're really going to look at is just adding a few more things. So I'm going to add a view to just before our text input. And I am going to say, sorry for that, I'm going to close the view, okay? Now let's define a style, right? Now, what's going to happen is when we're using, say we're using a very tiny mobile device, like this is a very, very stupid use case, but there's this there's this phone called the Elephant Q, which is really small, or say someone using a feature phone or some old Android device, okay? This view may just get cut off, right? So um, we can prevent that by just saying, let's just make a style called fill, and it's just going to have flex colon one, okay? And basically this flex colon one will just say, just fill up all the space. And I'm just going to add another thing that says flex direction. And I'm just going to say row. And I'm actually going to add one more style to this saying flex actually justify content. Oh, you know what? We already had that style before. So save that. Now what we can do is let's go to this view and say style equals style styles dot fill, right? So if we save that, and it's much bigger, right? So now, say I want to give, we had another style. If we scroll through our style, we've got a container style. How, say to that view that we just made that holds all our controls, how would I add the container style to that as well? Like say I wanted the flex, the fill style and the container style to act on that view. Anyone have any thoughts as to how we could do that? Okay, so the style prop can also take an array of styles. So what I can just do is I can just say in our view, that is container. And in this view that I say styles.fill, I can just open up an array, styles.fill, oh, comma, styles.container, right? If I save that, there we go. So it's also applying that container style. Now, admittedly, I'm not sure if this is a very good style, but feel free to play around with the style. This code, so the code for the alpha position finder application, the alphabets application is on the website. So without the style, of course. So if you want to, play around with the style, add styles to it, things like that, feel free to do so, right? So questions about how we, passed in an array, how we made that fill style, things like that. So go back to the code. Just look at scroll to the bottom. Any questions? I'll wait for my internet to stable out. Okay, can I just have a quick confirmation? Can all of you still hear me clearly? I think my voice may have broken up one or two times before.
No, we can. Well, I can hear you at least.
All right, okay, then that's fine. All right, so with that, that was a huge mouthful. And with that, we're gonna break for some time, and then we're gonna come back and look at components. So our break is for around 10 minutes today because we ended our style part quite early. So I'll see you in around 10 minutes and we'll continue with components. If you do have any questions or have ideas, things like that, I'll keep the style code open. So if you don't want me to mess around with the style code or anything like that, you can mention it. Also, if you want me to add any feature to this alphabets code and want me to explain how I did that, I'll do that. So you can stay back, of course, but those who want to take a break, feel free to do so. See you in 10.
You are using the device audio. Mute my audio.
All right, everyone still with me? Or you guys need more time?
No, I'm here.
All
I'm
right,
with
cool.
you. I don't know about anyone else.
I think two people dropped out. They messaged me. They had slightly bad internet. It's kind of raining here. Anyway, so we'll get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so let's continue. So we're going to be talking about component life cycles. So I'm going to open up a file here because we need to type some pseudocode. So if you remember, I think it was 2 lectures ago, or actually 3 lectures ago, I talked about these things called components, right? And two different types of components. Would anyone like to tell me what those two different types of components are or what they're called?
Wasn't it input and button?
No, that's actually examples of components, but there are two types of components that you can create. So I'll write the code for both of them here. So one of them is export default function parentheses, and one of them is also, if I were to go a few lines down here, export default class app extends react dot component, no parentheses. Does that ring a bell? So one of them is called stateless functional components, right? And one of them is called react dot components. So basically, stateless functional components, as I said, their main purpose is just to take props being just certain arguments or certain kind of factors that make whatever they return more dynamic. And what they have to return is a node, which is something to show on the screen, okay? Something that the user sees. So that's what a component is, just like a Lego block. They don't have any other function. So, they don't have any state, they don't have anything like that. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, we have these things called react.components, okay? So if I look at this line, export default class app extends react.component, we've been extending from this. So now this is the class which gives, firstly, it gives this kind of more methods. So, you can attach more methods to it, things like that. And what else do you think that, being a class, what else would it give it? What's the benefit of using react.component? So I
You
said that,
can render it to the screen, I think.
yeah, so that's an advantage where you can, for example, call it from different other components. So, if you want your code to be more modular, what else? I'll give you a hint. It's a data management system in React Native. So I said stateless functional components or pure functional components.
Okay, so it
Yeah.
has a state, I think. It can have
Good
a state.
job. Good job. It does have a state. So React.components actually have this concept of state and, constructor and things like that. Right? But really the last thing, and I'd say the most important difference, is that React.components have what's called a life cycle. Okay. So what are your initial impressions on how this life cycle would work? Or as we call it, a component life cycle. What are your initial impressions on that? How do you think it's going to work?
Let's say the object or the how can I put it? Let's take an object for example, I think. I hope it's applicable.
Yeah, it is. Good
Um,
job. Keep going.
so the object gets created and it serves its purpose until it gets destroyed.
Good job. So I think in layman's terms, that's how you'd say it. So basically, so I'm going to draw this here. Actually, I'm going to write this down. So under the class, we have first what happens is a mount. Okay. And a mount is basically the React Native compiler saying, okay, you have to be rendered on the screen. So what happens is when this component is fed into the React Native compiler. So when the compiler reads this component, right, in your code, that's when this component is mounted. Okay. So this component is going to mount, and then it's gonna, every time we make some change to the state or something like that, it's gonna update. So you may have, I don't know how many ever updates, and an update is actually just a re-render. So, you know, when something is changed, as I said. And finally, the component is gonna unmount. And unmount is basically just the sophisticated word to say it's dead, it's destroyed. Okay, React Native has officially obliterated that component from its list of components. So React Native actually has a list of components. So say I have a few components. React Native might have a list that says, it basically looks like this. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next line and I'll say there's a component called app, and it's gonna say mounted at 5 updates, for example. So the app component has, it's mounted and it has 5 updates. So the app component is still living. Say there's another component called send, I guess. Send is mounted at 3 updates. We may have a component called input, which is mounted at 0 updates. So, you know, there's no update done to it. And finally, we have, let's just call this an intro screen, which is unmounted. Okay. So basically, React has this kind of a key value thing. So it has the name of the object and it's going to say it's mounted or unmounted. So does anyone have any questions on how the components are mounted or unmounted, or basically their life cycle? Now note, this does not apply to functional components. Only applies to React.components, the ones with a class word in front. Okay. So any questions about how React manages these or things like that? All right, so let's play with this a bit. I'm just gonna obliterate this file out of existence. So one of the things that you're going to build, and we're going to talk more in depth about this at the end of the lecture, is a Pomodoro timer. So I hope all of you were able to look at it. And basically, it is just this timer that lets you like alternate between work and break. So, you know, usually the convention is 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of break. So, you know, it's gonna, at the end of 25 minutes, your timer is supposed to vibrate, say, hey, it's break time. And then at the end of 5 minutes, it's gonna vibrate, you know, remind you, hey, it's work time, right? So this may be useful. So for example, now I've already written this code in advance. So let's open this. So let's open this mount.js file. Basically what you see is we say import React, comma, component from React. Now component from React basically is like a shorthand that just says, okay, instead of saying extends React.component, my class, I can just say extends component. Okay. We have text, we have a text component, we have a view and style sheet we've imported. Now we import this thing called constants from Expo. Now what this basically is it gives you a bunch of constants like the status bar, height of a device and things like that. We have this class, which is called counter. And we have in that state that's just 0, count 0. Now don't look at the componented mount and things like that. So let's just look at the render function. So we render, we just say, we just return one text. That's just saying text, it's returning one text and that the value of the text is just this.state.count, okay? And later on, we have this app class, which just has a view and it just renders the counter component. So if I were to just, oh, this won't work. All right, so let's copy this code, shall we? We're going to see it in just a minute, see how it looks. So I'm going to open up my RN50 directory. We're going to make a directory called src5. We'll cd src5. You guys know this. Let's init and expo directory. Oh, whoops, my internet is bad. Let's init and expo directory called component life cycles. Yeah, well, there's a new version of expo CLI. I'm going to update later. So we're going to do a blank template. Till then, I'm going to ask you all a question. So now my ultimate goal for this application is every, say, 1 second, I want the counter to increment. So it's currently at 0. So like every 1 second, it should be like 1, 2, 3, an auto and increment. Anyone like to tell me how I could do that and where could I do this? So where in the component's life cycle could I update this counter value? Anyone
Before
have any
it gets
guesses
unmounted?
Okay, yeah, before it gets unmounted, so somewhere before then. Any other guess specifically where before it gets unmounted?
When I'm not sure.
Okay. Also, so there's one more function that I would like to talk about, which we're going to use now is I'm going to open up my node terminal. We've not seen this in a while. Hi node. And here I'm going to say set interval console.log hello world, comma 1000. Would anyone like to guess what the set interval function does? I'm going to test this. Oh, it did not work. Okay. I'm going to test this again.
The
Okay.
sec interval is when a second has elapsed, I'll say.
Yeah, so what this actually does is just if you can see the screen, this is going ballistic. And what it's doing is it's printing hello world every 1 second. We said 1000 milliseconds. So it's printing hello world every second. So, you know, those who can see my terminal window, you can see that hello world is getting printed every second. And I am just going to exit that. Oh boy, my terminal just is lagging. Okay, there we go. My terminal stopped lagging. So before we actually look at this code in action, let's just see what the code for updating this counter would look like. Okay, so if I were to check this counter, and if you look at this, we have a component did mount. Okay, so basically this is actually a method that the class gives for you, and you don't really need to call it because React Native will actually call this method every time this class is mounted automatically. So you can see component did mount is a function. And here we say this dot timer equals set interval. Okay. Set interval, if you remember, was just this thing that just, you know, ran some. So set interval just runs some function that you provided every interval. So if I say, okay, run the console.log to print hello world every second, it's going to print hello world every second. In this case, we're saying run this dot increment function or this dot increment count every 1000 every 1 second. Okay. And if you look at my increment count function, we just say this dot set state, we take the previous state and we set the count to previous state dot count plus 1. Okay. So anyone have any questions on how that?
You are using the device. Mute my audio.
Anyone have any questions on how that component did mount works. So basically what we're doing is component did mount is like a method that's called for you every time the class starts up or gets mounted. And what happens is normally it would just do nothing or just initialize your constructor if you have one. But we can actually override or add to that behavior in some sense by just saying, okay, do this whenever the component mounts. And for us, we're saying run this dot increment count function every second. Okay, so let's just look at our terminal. So installing JavaScript dependencies. So we also have some style at the bottom. We say in here, if you can see, we're saying constants.status bar height, which basically specifies set the padding top to just the same height as the status bar, just a little below that. So we just have one style there, and we're saying to view to that. All right, so probably let's add in another style to that. Oh, I'm just going to say text style, and let's give it a font size of, let's just say 50, a huge font size, and font weight of 4. All right. And if I go back up, so my text, I'll just say style equals style dot text style, and then just checking. All right, so we have that style in place. Oh, I don't want to save that. Just want to copy this code. All right, so we're done. I'm going to close one of my windows here. All right. Whoops. I'm just going to close a few of my windows here. All right, so let's go to our component lifecycle. Let's open up .js. And over here, I'm going to clear this code. I'm going to remove this import constants because that actually doesn't work. So I'm going to, for this, for my padding top, I'm just going to say 50. All right, so let's save that. Let's run our export server. So our project is opening. And do you guys think this code is going to run? Or do you see a bug? So let's open it in my web browser. And hopefully this will work. So I'm just killing time here, trying to complain for time. But this will open up in my web browser, and once it does, we'll be set to play around with these components a little, okay? So just opening. Oh, this is taking a lot of time. So I'm just gonna again take this opportunity to ask, does anyone have any questions on how you manage that style bit and the component did mount function and how we handle that? Any questions at all? All right, so that's fine. We're just gonna wait. Yep, it's kind of lagging because of my internet, but hopefully the server should be up in some time. And basically what this just gonna do is just gonna increment the counter. So, it's gonna start from 0, it's gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so on. All right, so this is doing its thing. And it should, in theory, in just a second here, come on. All right, so it's just running its code in the background. And hopefully, all right, I think, right, it's, all right, so I think lagging, but it's, all right. So just ignore the fail to compile, that's just, and you can see the counter is just updating. It's 10 now, 12, 13, and you can see every second it's just going up, right? It's on 16 now, it's 18, 19, 20, 21, so on and so forth. I can even leave this window and, well, we'll continue on our work. All right. All right, so we looked at the mount. Now let's look at another code, which is basically the code for how will we manage like an update. So you may want to think of this update may be very useful if you're handling network events. So say you're making a game in React Native, and it's a multiplayer game, so you can manage, like, you can poll for network events, things like that. That's when the update. So let's copy that code and let's view what that will do. I'm going to open up another, if this will let me. And you can see it's already at 83. So let's open that code. Let's open up app.js. And let's clear all this code. Paste this. I'm going to import, remove that. And just, so I'm not really going to worry about the style here. I'm just going to say 50. All right. So we have this, and let's see what this code does. Okay. So let's, if I reload, and you can see it's just incrementing by 2. So it's at 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. All right. So this is just updating. Let's see how we did this. Okay. So if you look at our class only update on events, this is what it's saying. So now we have this. This is kind of weird, but we say should component update, which is basically the component update function. Just like we had component did mount, we have should component update. Now we say next props, which basically just say, okay, what's the next prop? And we just say return next prop start count %2. Okay, so that will just, that's just a quick check if it's an odd number or an even number. And now we have our component did update. And we're just saying console.log this props.count. And then we render. So let's just see what we render. We render this.props.count. And if we look at our counter class, we say component did mount. So we say this dot timer, we set an increment count, and we set it to increment every half a second. Now, if you look at our increment count function, we just update the count. Now we say return only uneven. evens count equals this dot state dot count. Now, what does this do, right? It's really, really complicated. So if you look at our only update on evens, we're saying should component update. So this is basically just handling what should happen if the component will update. We return this thing that says next dot counts return. We just check if it's not next props dot count %2, and the percent stands for modular. So it would just get the remainder between next props dot count and 2, and it'll just negate that. So it's checking if it's true or if it's false. And we say component did update. We just console log this props dot count. Okay. So if you will look at, we're already at 310. If I were to reload this page, it's 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and this is going every half a second. Okay. Basically, it's not, so it's updating the count by 1 every half a second, but it's only rendering every second because we're only rendering, even counts. Okay, so one would, if I were to remove that class and only render this state that count, it would just render this. So it's already at 54. Now that was very confusing, right? So questions about the update model. If you want, I'll explain it again. Did you guys understand the update model? Do you have any questions on what happens when the component updates? Anything else? All right. Close. I'm going to close these two windows. All right, so let's look at the last thing that's just, whoops. Let's just look at the unmount, okay? And let's copy the unmount thing here. And we don't need this directory anymore. Open up app.js. Clear that. All right, so we have a button here. And if you look, we define our style sheet. We have a count that has a big font size. Now let's look at our counter class. We say we have a constructor, and our state is just having count as 0. We have a component did mount. We say this dot interval equals set interval. This dot inc, which is our function, and we set it to 1 second. Now we say component will unmount. So what will happen when the component unmounts? We say just clear interval, that just clears all the data. So it will just stop the interval. It will basically stop the counter. Okay. And our inc function just console.log increment, and we set the count to count plus 1 in the state. Okay. Now, if you look at if you look at our render, so we say this dot state dot count. All right, let's look at our app class, which is quite interesting. So we have a Boolean flag in the state that says show counter, which is set to true. And we have a function that says toggle counter. And we set the state to show counter, which is the opposite of the show counter value in the current state. So if the value is true, it'll be false. Okay. So if you look at our render, we say if this dot state dot show counter, we'll say view return view styles, well, the style. Now we have this button that says it has this thing that says toggle counter, and we just show the counter component, and we say else return just the button. Okay. So we have another more concise function, well, a little more concise way of doing it. So we have that. So you really don't need to worry about that. But let's run this. So if I toggle the contacts, it's just gonna stop. Click stop again. Click on that, stops, and starts. There we go. So that's how it works. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the app.js file. So any questions on how did we unmount, or actually any questions on how the whole component thing works? Any questions at all? All right, so we're going to apply some of this logic to our current application. Okay, so I'm going to stop my server. I'm going to go into SRC3. So let's open up our alphabet application, and I'll maximize that for you. Now, let's look at our alphabets class. And just before I render, let's just write a component did mount, and let's just alert, welcome to our app. Hope you find this useful. Okay. Oh, so if I run this, so I do start. Theoretically, what should happen as soon as my app loads? Anyone like to chip in and tell me?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
So theoretically, now I just said component did mount, and in the component did mount function, I said, okay, alert, well, just say welcome to our app. Yeah, basically that. Hope you enjoy it. So what should happen as soon as my app loads?
You will see an alert box popping up.
All right, so yeah, you will see an alert box popping up. Let's see. Hope I have done that right. Loading. The problem with Expo is that it takes a long time to load. Attempt to open it in a web browser. I really love the way that Expo says attempt. Trust me, it's actually real because Expo often fails. Hopefully. You know, the funny thing is, even though we closed the server, it's still running. So you can see the code is still running. All right. So again, all right, this is doing its thing. Come on. All right, Expo Web. And there we go, see, our alert box just popped up. And yeah, so component, so that worked. Let's write another thing. Let's just say component we really don't need an update, but we'll see it soon. Component will unmount, and let's just say alert exiting. Hope to see you soon. Terrible English, but yeah. Save. Oh. Oh wow. Okay. If I close this now, it's theoretically not going to work on my computer because I just downright closed it. But on the phone, what this would do is just before you close the application, you're going to see that alert box pop up, which is really not convenient, but well, that's fine. All right. Whew. Any questions on styles and component life cycles? All right. So what I thought at the end I would do is I would open up my Pomodoro timer and show you how it looks like. So I am going to back out. I'm going to show you exactly what your project looks like on the web. So we're going to move. All right. Oh, didn't want to do that. All right, I'm going to load. Oh, didn't want to do that. Whoops. All right, so let's just load this saying we're going to add packages. Oh, okay, yarn install. Whoops. So it's just installing everything, all the modules required for this app to work. And when you actually do this in while you actually work and this app runs on your phone, it'll actually run really fast because Yarn will already have these modules installed. So it's just installing. Basically, your project is, as I said, it's going to be that Pomodoro timer, and the more detailed specifications will come on before. I think you all have seen the mobile version of it, how it looks on the phone. So if you have any initial questions based on how you're going to implement that, you can ask me right away. You know, some ideas, things like that.
So we are going to have to use the view component, right?
Yeah, the view component is just going to wrap everything, right? It's going to wrap all your components. Um, Actually, I think I'll be giving you the code to render. So all you have to work on is basically just the logic of the code. Now, there's also going to be this optional segment where, you know, you can ask the user for the time, but that's really, again, as I said, optional. So you know, if you feel up to the challenge, you can try that. Otherwise, you can just ignore it, right? So yarn is just, it's doing its thing. We'll just let it do its. Hopefully my Expo version isn't outdated. I was using an old version. Ah, there we go. So it's just, there's a lot of loading to do because this is also, this will be the first time that you actually work with third-party modules. So the only module that we really worked with was Expo. But here you're actually going to work with things like the Vibrate module that we'll provide you, and you can even use React Native's built-in Vibrate module, things like that. Okay. So, you know, because the goal is at the end of the thing, you have to make the phone vibrate. Now, one more challenge that you may want to do is, now you can Google up how to do this because it's a very simple component. You may want to like play a alarm sound at the end whenever the timer is finished. So, you know, you may want to work with that as well. Oh, so it's just loading here. Yarn is a bit annoying because it loads. quite a bit of data. But what are your initial impressions? How might you set up this time? Things like that. So that's essentially where you're going to think about it. The way to think about would be, thinking about where you're going to set this timer up, which part of the life cycle specifically. And a lot of the work is going to be on, optimizing that timer, things like that. Okay. So you basically just have to make a simple timer that has some logic to do with work time or break time, things like that. And of course, you can contact me during the week. Okay, we're almost done. We're at 17,000. I think we're stuck. Yep, oh no, there we go. So I'm just whiling away for playing for time here, because problem with running React Native on the web is that you have to install your modules every time you run it. Because sometimes the modules may just get uninstalled from your browser, things like that. Also, while we're at it, I'm going to give you a quick tip. It's generally, so I've been writing all my components in the same file, right? But it's generally better code design to actually separate your components into different files. And you can actually just import those components. So just like we imported, say I had a hypothetical file that was just called counter, I could just say, or I had a component inside that called count. I could just say import count from dot slash count. Okay, dot slash is basically in the same directory. So this is the same as just saying import view from React Native. Oh, double quote. So that's almost done. 736. All right, so we're done, and hopefully our version of Expo is not okay. It's running, so hopefully that's a good sign, and you guys will get to see this in the browser. So come on. The vibrate module is not going to work because we're running it on a PC. Now, I have not. Oh, it won't run. All right. So that experiment failed. But as I said, you can always look at that link that I uploaded. And that just shows the whole project on phone, so you can download that. It's for Android, and I believe I can find a link for the iOS devices as well, so you can try that out. So yeah, with that, does anyone have any questions on any of the topics covered so far? In all the lectures, including this one. No. All right. So with that, we come to the end of our lecture. So this is lecture 5, and actually this will conclude half the course. And so we only have 6 more weeks to go for the class to culminate. So again, as I said, you guys can start thinking about your final projects, but also you can focus on this one. It's not a very hard project, I would say. It's just, some logic. So yeah, I'll open up a form tonight where you can, start uploading your projects, things like that. And I hope you guys were able to solve that quiz that I uploaded. I think there was a form. I think that was a survey hard form. But yeah, so with that, I will see you all next Friday. And we will next Friday be looking at data and how to import data into your application from some online server. All right. With that, if you do have any questions, don't forget to, or don't hesitate to actually call me during the week or at any time. You can even drop me an email or send me a